Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West channel. In today's episode, you'll hear Chapter 2 of my novel, Hunting Charm, and I'll have another plate of history beans. If you like my writing, I hope you'll visit my author's page on Amazon, link below. If you're interested in signed copies of Hunting Charm or any of my novels, please check out my Patreon page, also with a link below. If you enjoy this video, I'd be grateful if you hit the subscription button and the bell icon. So without further ado, this is Chapter 2 of Hunting Charm on the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles. In Chapter 1 of Hunting Charm, The Buffalo Soldier and His Bride, we met Cecil Johnson and his wife Cynthia. We also met a mysterious former slave, Henry Cactus Branch Walker, a man who lived beneath a perpetual cloud of woe because of injuries he received from slave catchers as a boy. Finally, we met Doreen Tarwater, the daughter of Abilene stockyard owner Theo Tarwater. As the chapter ended, we learned that Doreen had hidden away in the back of one of Cecil Johnson's wagons following his sale of mules at the stockyards in Abilene. Now, in Chapter 2, the barroom brawl, the scene changes dramatically to several weeks later when the two heroes of our story are reunited after Matt Grayson is hired by Theo Tarwater to find his missing daughter. Chapter 2, Hunting Charm, The Barroom Brawl. Hunter Brantley slumped against the saloon rail, tilted a shot glass into his mouth, and settled in for another day of boozing. He ignored the rumbling in his gut, knowing the acid blaze would disappear if he could only take another swallow or two. Drinking early and often had become his habit, and he had no plans to break with tradition on this day, which he judged to be Monday, though it might have been a Wednesday. Hunter, unshaven and filthy, loved drinking, but he enjoyed his own sense of self-pity more. He stared into his shot glass and felt a satisfying tear well up in his eyes. "Oh, Patsy," he croaked. Matt Grayson, Brant's trail partner, arrived that morning, knowing he had work to do. He had received word from Brant's mother that her son had required rescue from the evils of drink and moral degradation. "It's a problem his daddy always struggled with, and I reckon Hunter caught the boozing bug too. He's a weakling, despite them books about his fast gun and all." Hunter's mother spoke the words plainly in a flat monotone. "I reckon you'll need to fetch him back here for a few days so we can get him cleaned up." "Yes, ma'am." Matt, the perfect gentleman, tipped his hat. Fully aware he might get his tail kicked, as Hunter had kicked his tail at least 3 times in the past, Matt, nevertheless, sauntered confidently into the Dodge City saloon that morning, boot heels knocking along the pine wood floor. His knowledge of Brant's superior fighting skill did not diminish faith in his ability to convince Brant of his erroneous ways. "Brant, you're gonna float off in that bottle if you don't take a rest." Matt gave Brant a slap on the shoulder, an action that drew no response. For a moment, Matt wondered if the liquor had impaired his friend's hearing. "You can't even say howdy to your partner?" Hunter remained silent. "I reckon you can't hear me, so I'll say whatever I like. Did I mention you look like a dead dog that's been dragged through a pigsty? An improvement, I'd say. You were never a handsome man, and the smell coming off of you, well, it's enough to overpower a pasture full of daisies. What do you say to that?" Hunter said nothing. He didn't even look at Matt. For his part, Matt was beginning to believe Hunter had sustained some sort of traumatic brain injury. Actually, I may have some explanation for you, but should I put this olfactory effrontery? I don't know what I'm looking at back here, but Matt regarded Hunter's backside. I think you might have trusted a bit of gas that you shouldn't have. Once again, Hunter remained silent. Inside, however, he felt his resolve slipping. Matt could be as persistent as a fly on a horse's hindquarters. Sensing a weakening, Matt studied his friend, noting a lowering of the brow and a slight exhalation. He decided a gentler approach might be in order. Brant, despite the many tales of his heroic gunslinging expertise, had always been sensitive. I'm just joshing you. It's your old pal Matt. Hunter, can't you even say hello? I came all the way from Ulysses to check on you. A long pause then. Howdy. There you go. I knew you could be civil if you put a mind to it. When's the last time we spoke? 4 months? 5? Brant nodded slightly, recalling long hours spent riding a cold trail, listening constantly to a string of theories and observations about whatever crime or kidnapping they happened to be investigating. Matt's annoying smile and outgoing personality grated on Brant, even at the best of times. What do you want, Matt? Brant croaked. You're getting downright loquacious on me. Matt gave Brant a poke in the shoulder. What was that? 5 or 6 words all strung together? Shut up and tell me why you're here. Matt stared at Brant for a long moment, grinning. I told you already. Your mother asked me to check on you. Brant didn't respond to the comment. He didn't feel compelled to explain the early drinking or the absence of niceties such as washing and grooming. Matt Grayson could kiss his hindquarters. The guy spent too much time on his hair. Doesn't a man have the right to drink himself to death? Brant grumbled. I'm a man, ain't I? I'm sure you wish I would leave so you could cozy up to that bottle, but on top of your mother's obviously valid concerns, I have a job for us. I need your assistance. Judging from your condition, however, I'm not certain you're ready for our next adventure. I knew that brilliant detective's mind would get it eventually. I'm unfit to ride, so why don't you just clippity-clop on down the trail? Matt nodded and moved closer to the rail, motioning for a glass. The handsome cowboy gazed at the bottle sitting near Brant's left elbow, noting the liquid's cloudy appearance. Good brand, he said. I hear they age this stuff up to 3 or 4 hours in a galvanized wash tub, then they cut it with strychnine to get that bite. Good for the gut if you drink it religious-like. Brant predictably said nothing, so Matt took a moment to survey the surroundings. An elderly man, bald and scraggly, lay snoring at a battered piano near the stage. The bartender, an old Mexican guy, stood behind the counter while a boy, maybe a grandson, sat on a step stool at his feet playing an eerie melody again and again on a wooden flute. Sunlight intruded through a window but did nothing to lighten the gloom surrounding Hunter Brantley. The barkeep began sweeping the unsweepable floor, launching clouds of dust that danced in shafts of light. The boy's eerie melody played again and again, accompanied by the sound of wagon chains jingling by. Hunter sighed and farted, wincing as he tossed back another shot. Guess you ain't heard from Patsy. Matt decided it might be time to ease the monotony by asking about Brant's former fiancée. Brant took a deep breath and turned slowly, glaring at Matt. Why don't you shut up? Big ladies man, ain't ya? Different gal in every town. Brant's voice gained intensity. You said it yourself, I ain't a good-looking man. I ain't the kind of fella the gals take to. That doesn't mean I don't like 'em. I'm a normal man with normal needs, Matt. Why can't you just leave things be? Matt suppressed a grin, mumbled an apology, and focused on what looked like a bloodstain on the wall near a frame that had once been a mirror. A few minutes of sweeping, jingling chains, flute playing, and farting passed before Matt dared speak again. I got us a good-paying job, but I need your help. One of these stockmen in Abilene says his daughter ran off with a colored fella. He said his girl wasn't in her right mind and sent out a couple of other men after her. When they came back, they reported the gal dead. I ain't so sure she is dead, but anyhow, this stockman wants the man found. He got our name from Mr. Patterson in Kansas City. You remember how we tracked down his wife who ran off with that Yankee soldier? This gentleman in Abilene is offering 500 gold plus 200 in expenses to find his girl. Matt waited for a long moment, but Brant remained silent. I found out the colored man and his family live in Indian Territory in one of those colored townships. I figured you and I could ride out there and have a look. Brant felt his hands shaking and tasted acid from his burning gut. The normally calming effects of rot gut weren't enough to counteract Matt's persistent chattering. Still, he had to try. Brant reached for the bottle. Then, in an act of shocking audacity, Matt placed a hand on Brant's arm. You gotta put that bottle down, brother. You're sick from this stuff, and your mama and me, well, we would miss you if you died. Brant struggled to lift the bottle, growling, Why don't you mind your business? No, sir. Matt gripped Brant's forearm more forcefully. You ain't taking another drink today. If I must fight you, well, I will. Maybe I ain't never been able to take you up to now, but this might be my day. Take your hand off that bottle before you get me riled. Go on and get riled, but you... Matt gulped. You, by God, ain't taking another drink. The barkeeper stopped his cleaning, looking nervously at the two men. The ancient ivory tinkler, now awake and somehow fully aware of the situation, moved toward the door, ready to alert any passers-by should a fight break out. The seconds ticked by as Brent struggled to lift his arm, and Matt, with leverage, pinned it back to the bar again. Finally, as if he might be prepared to concede, Brant eased his hand away and nodded, lifting both hands in resignation. The barkeeper sighed. The pianist reclined once more onto his bench, and the boy began his eerie, tedious melody once more on the wooden flute. Unfortunately, the barman's relief was short-lived. Brant's seeming concession had been a mere ruse, and with surprising alacrity for one so drunk, the reeking cowboy swung a bashing fist, which landed harshly upon the jaw of Matt Grayson, sending the handsome cowboy reeling back into a nearby table. Instantly, the sleeping pianist bounded through the barroom door, shouting, "Fight! We got a fight in here!" Matt, surprised and stunned by the punch, reeled backwards, only able to remain upright with the help of a table. "That was a good punch, but I don't think you got near the pepper on it you once had." Matt spat blood, grinning and rubbing his jaw. I think the whiskey has taken the iron out of your hammer, Brant. I still got plenty enough iron to nail your pretty tailbone to the floorboards. No, sir, not today. Matt Grayson lowered his shoulder and charged. The initial contact pushed Brant up against the bar rail, knocking him breathless. A split second later, Matt's fist connected, sending Brant reeling down the bar, where he somehow caught the lip of an overfull spittoon with the toe tip of his boot and launched it, the reeking contents showering him head to toe. Matt charged a second time, using his momentum to punch Brant squarely in the temple. The sound, like a horse's hoof knocking against the wooden sides of a stall, resonated through the room. The crowd at the doorway reacted with groans of approval. Brant, reeling from the punch, struggled to remain on his feet. He swayed precariously, shook violently, then slapped himself on each cheek to restore brain function. Then, just as Brant seemed ready to re-engage, the drunken cowboy's expression changed to one of desperate alarm. He burped, then heaved. "Clear path," he roared. "I'm gonna spew." As he forced his way past a rotund, mayoral-looking man, Brant felt Matt's grip on his shoulder. The whiskey and acid from Brant's tender tummy rose, and as Matt's final devastating punch landed, sending Brant into a slow-motion pirouette through the barroom doors and onto the wooden sidewalk outside, the forlorn cowboy realized with a degree of satisfaction that he had, in that crucial moment, managed to expel the contents of his stricken stomach with splashing effectiveness into the face of his lifelong friend and partner, Matt Grayson. As the skies undulated above him, Hunter Brantley fell onto the wooden decking in a butt-stomped dream, but with a curious look of bliss. He lay gazing upwards. The clumping of boots, amplified by the wooden porch, seemed almost musical. He wanted to tell the whole group to settle down. After all, a man needs his rest. Then, with a contented burp, he closed his eyes. The sparkling blue skies faded to black while the crowd, voicing disappointment that things had ended quickly, with hardly enough time to place bets on the outcome, stared down at the filthy, unshaven, tobacco-spittle and blood-splattered, barely breathing remains of Hunter Brantley. He woke some time later, a bitter taste thickening his mouth, his clothing damp, the smell of rain in the air, the sky tilted in between the parting clouds, the crystalline blue that comes following a shower in the late days of April, knifed into his skull. Head throbbing, he sat up, but something was wrong. "What in blue blazes?" he yelled. "What in the hell do you think you're doing, Matt? This is beyond civilized behavior." Brant rattled the leg irons that connected his ankles to the side rails of Matt's wagon. "You'd best just settle back there," Matt advised. "The doc back in town gave you enough laudanum to knock out a donkey. Sorry about the leg irons." Brant felt his anger rise and began to thrash about wildly, jerking at the chains. His fury lasted only a few seconds before waves of nausea overwhelmed him. Despite his anger, Brant was forced to lay back and stare once more at the rotating sky. "You can't keep me tied up like a prisoner forever, you know." "Don't intend to." "When you let me loose, I'm gonna kick your butt so high you'll have to pull your six-shooter with your molars." "We'll see." Matt slapped the reins to increase the pace, causing the wagon to bounce uncomfortably along the primitive roadway. Is it necessary to go so fast? I'm hoping to get into Ulysses by nightfall. Ulysses? Well, I figure there wasn't a better place to take your raggedy ass. I'm gonna let your mama get a look at you. What the hell, Matt? Brant's voice cracked in anguish. I gotta get cleaned up to see Mama. This ain't square dealing. I'll tell you what ain't square dealing is you drinking yourself into a state of disgust. I'm downwind of you, and you still smell like a rotted cow. When's the last time you had a bath? It wasn't more than a month ago. Well, I know you haven't changed clothes lately. You still have that bit of stew on your shirt from October. It's April, Brant. April. You totally let yourself go and you did it over a danged woman. I understand that you and Patsy talked about getting married, but this is plumb ridiculous. Brant didn't know how to reply. Upon consideration, he realized he had neither bathed nor shaved for some time. He pulled himself onto his elbows, shivering, examining his attire. His buckskins were ragged and greasy, and his shirt had large concentric circles of dried sweat under both arms. Crusty patches of food and other detritus spotted his entire ensemble, and holes in both of his pants and shirt revealed patches of dirty skin. He rubbed a hand across his face and realized that his scraggly beard and hair, matted with dirt, food, vomit, and tobacco spit, conformed to his head like a grotesque mask. You gotta let me stop and clean up some before we get to Ulysses, Brant said. It ain't good for Mama to see me looking so scraggly. She gets spells when she gets worked up. You think she wasn't worked up already? Your mama heard from Willie Branson about a month ago that you were drinking and falling down like a fool. She told me to fetch you home. I would have done it sooner, but I had to see that man in Abilene. Everyone in Ulysses knows about you and Patsy. There's some that feel sorry for you, though I can't say I'm one. Drinking yourself into a hog wallow over a gal is ridiculous. I reckon you ain't got a dime of that $200 I gave you. For a moment, Brant felt a surge of anger, but it melted quickly as he considered the response he would get from his mother when she saw his present state. What can I do to let me stop off and just rinse off in the creek? I don't plan on chaining you until we pull into your mama's place. I promised I'd get you back home, and that's what I plan to do. Damn it, Matt, you stop this wagon right here and let's settle this. I ain't never done nothing to deserve this treatment. Besides drinking yourself half to death? You've done plenty, Hunter. What about when you told that gal in Arkansas about how I'd been fooling around with the preacher's wife? Matt began rolling a cigarette, tucking the reins beneath a leg. Matt, you know damn well you were fooling around with that preacher's wife. And the gal, as you call her, was the preacher's daughter. We were lucky that preacher didn't kill us. He was one crazy sumbitch with that Bible in one hand and a shotgun in the other. Oh, I see. So it's okay if you jump in the middle of my foolhardy business, but I can't intervene if you're about to kill yourself. Matt sparked a lucifer, lit the hen roll, then offered it to Brant. Smoke? Thank you. Brant's hands shook so violently he could barely hold the fuming cheroot. That ain't the point, Matt. What I'm saying is, you didn't have any good reason for acting poorly. You wanted to fool around with two different women, and one of them was married, and the other, her daughter, wasn't old enough to play around with like what you had in mind. Oh, I see, and your reason for drinking half the booze in Kansas wasn't a bit foolhardy. Is that what you're saying? I personally can't see the good sense in killing yourself because some gal left you. There's a world full of women, Hunter, and you're tall. Women like that. I know it wasn't sensible for me to be so downhearted when Patsy ran off, but I never expected her to leave so sudden like. I miss her something awful, and I can't stop thinking about how we could have had, well, we could have been. Oh, hell, you can't understand how I feel. You ain't never lacked for the attention of a gal. Jesus H. Christ, wearing a mesquite hat. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I've been lonely before. It's a natural part of life. You talk like you're the only fella that ever got his heart broken. Matt rolled and lit a second cigarette, then gave the reins a snap. The wagon rattled on, the two men cooling off as the flatlands of Kansas rolled by. Eventually, Brent, still numb from laudanum, dozed, sleeping fitfully through the afternoon. When he awoke, head pounding and one leg cramping, he thrashed about for another long moment until he had to stop again for dizziness. From his vantage point in the wagon bed, Brent could see that it must be nearing evening. He knew the country and realized they would not make Ulysses for hours. A cold craving for whiskey clutched at his guts. He had seen men, his father mainly, suffering from tremens, crying out for a drink. One day, the old man had simply fallen in his tracks. The doctor spoke of heart failure, but Brent knew the booze and working like a devil day and night for little money and no respect had killed his father. Brent missed his boisterous and sometimes sullen old man, but time had taken the edge off things. When his mother remarried, he felt a sense of relief, and even though Brent knew he would never think of Fred Tucker as his father, at least the man cared for his mother, didn't drink much, and had turned the farm into a profitable venture. That booze can kill you. Some folks are just prone to drink too much. Sometimes drinking runs in families, Matt said. How the hell do you do that, Matt? Do what? I was just thinking about how my daddy drank himself to death. How is it you seem to know what I'm thinking half the time? I reckon I've just known you for so long, it's natural. Brent just nodded, and the silence between the men stretched out like a prairie. As the shadows of evening crept across the plain, the waning sun painted the sparse clouds orange, then purple, and finally a deep glowing umber. Matt pulled to a stop near the Cimarron River. As he circled the wagon to unhitch the team, he said, I reckon I'll let you get a bath tomorrow morning if you promise not to try and run off for more whiskey. Matt led the team a few yards away to drink and graze. Are you gonna unhitch me? You're not gonna just leave me chained up here all night, right, Matt? Matt didn't respond. Instead, the handsome cowboy made camp, pitching his tent and ignoring Brent. Eventually, Brent ceased complaining. Matt clearly had no plan to unchain him. As night fell, Hunter Brantley's stomach settled and the previous tilting sky leveled and filled with a mist of stars. When Matt wordlessly handed him a plate of beans, for once, he welcomed the nourishment. Matt, what were you saying about that job you had for us? Get some sleep, partner. I'll tell you about it in the morning. That was chapter 2 of my novel, Hunting Charm. Now it's time for another History Plate of Beans. Last week's Plate of Beans, we heard about buffalo soldiers and the important military service of black soldiers in the settlement of the Old West. In that episode, I mentioned that along with history from the 19th century, we would look at some of the contemporary ways the Old West has been romanticized for modern audiences. The barroom brawl is a common trope found in dozens, perhaps hundreds of Western movies and serials. Another, perhaps less common recurring theme is about redemption. In this case, about a man struggling with alcoholism. With that in mind, today I would like to talk briefly about the movie Rio Bravo. Rio Bravo, released in 1959, was produced and directed by Howard Hawks, a man movie critic Roger Ebert called one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. The movie stars John Wayne and Dean Martin and features Ricky Nelson, former child star from the TV show Leave It to Beaver, as Colorado. A young actress who would go on to dozens of other starring roles, both in movies and on television, Angie Dickinson is featured as John Wayne's love interest. In Hunting Charm, I loosely reinterpret the iconic opening scene of Rio Bravo and include a number of other Western movie cliches. There are several passing nods to the romanticized Old West in Chapter 2. A couple of the more obvious ones are the crusty old piano player and the boy playing a wooden flute, a subtle nod to Ennio Morricone, a composer perhaps best known for his work on so-called spaghetti westerns, including the film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Anyone recall the wooden flute from that film? But back to Rio Bravo. In the movie, John Wayne plays a sheriff who faces off against the spoiled son of a local land baron. If you're a fan of westerns, I probably don't have to remind you of the plot. If you haven't seen the movie lately, you might check it out again. For myself, a lot of those old movies seem a little lame, but thanks to great performances and adept direction, this one holds up pretty well. Director Howard Hawks, who made several iconic films, including The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Marilyn Monroe, and the iconic western Red River, also with John Wayne, is said to have made Rio Bravo, at least in part, in response to the movie High Noon, a film that vaguely criticized McCarthyism and the Hollywood blacklisting of the time. Hawks didn't think High Noon made much sense. I'll let you debate that one for yourself. Both High Noon and Rio Bravo are great films, if you ask me. Rio Bravo was released to mixed reviews, but did extremely well at the box office, raking in nearly $6 million within a year of its release. The British film critic Robin Woods loved the film and said that if he were asked to choose a film that would justify the existence of Hollywood, it would be Rio Bravo. The movie is still highly regarded by many. Director Quentin Tarantino called Rio Bravo his favorite hangout film, and even said that if his date didn't like the movie, that was a deal breaker. Rio Bravo regularly appears on top 10 lists of the greatest Western movies ever made. As I say, even though the movie is from another era, it's still worth watching if you enjoy Westerns. That's it for today's episode. Once more, if you enjoyed my writing, check out my Amazon or Patreon pages, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again for tuning in to the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles.